Uh, Any questions, corrections, comments in regards to the minutes? Okay, so I need the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. All in favor, all opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, so now we get into the nitty gritty of this and the new business. All right, the Block and Run flood control project. And with us, we have John Hill and Kevin Brett. And John, I think you're the one that's going to be speaking, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, and, oh, by the way, thank you for numbering the pages. All right, and after, so the first part of it is going to be, you're going to give us an update as to what's transpired recently, what we've done to improve the situation. And then secondly, we're going to go through your proposal, the process, right?
Yes, I'm actually also going to discuss what's been occurring by nature related, so we understand the whole process.
Okay,
There's a lot going on, obviously.
okay,
So, as you know, we have in Rochester Borough a number of projects throughout the watershed area that have impact to what's going to occur flooding lines. It starts off with where on the back channel of Chartiers Creek, where all this water goes to begin with, if it doesn't flow, nothing's going to flow upstream. The models all show the backwater of Chartiers Creek backed up a Block and Run. So that all being said, we want to start with, let's make sure the Chartiers Creek is flowing as well.
can I just ask one question before you go any further? If we have questions, would you prefer to finish?
You can interrupt me.
Okay, all right.
So that all being said, one of the first projects that the borough tackled was at where Pingers Run discharges in the back channel of Chartiers Creek. We did a dredging project to remove a very, very large sediment bar that has accumulated in the creek to block the flow significantly. So that one was done. Borough staff got the work completed. Looks great. Then we did one also right at the mouth of McLaughlin Run. There was another very large sandbar that was restricting the flow of McLaughlin Run to a trickle on one edge for normal storm. It's obviously when the stream came up, it would go over top the sandbar, but it was obviously restricting some of the flow. So those two projects are done and cleaned up, and we're just waiting for final stabilization, and then those projects are completed. We also last year did Maple Street wall repair, which was basically there was a section in the middle that was gaping baskets, end of life, starting to sag, didn't provide enough elevation. So we replaced that section of the wall and put a cap across the entire length of that wall in that area. That is not a solution. It's a first step in the whole process. It keeps it level with the ground on the other side. Going to bring it up higher because then you cause flooding on the adjacent property, which DEP will not let you do. So it got us to a point where both sides of the stream are at the same elevation. So when the water comes up, this guy's not going to flood more than this guy, or vice versa. So that's where that sits. In the fall, they finished up the McLaughlin Run Park flood control project. The intent of that project is not to prevent flooding. The intent of that project is to capture all the large debris that's coming downstream, the cars, the dumpsters, the very large trees that are they're coming out of the upstream municipalities. The idea is that we captured it by the trash rack that was installed. The ball field was lowered, one to provide volume for storage, two to give the water somewhere to go when that starts backing up, so that we don't cause flooding upstream. Cause flooding in anybody else's yards. So TA Robinson sits it. We could not increase the flooding at TA Robinson. We could not increase the flooding on St. Clair. So we had to make sure that not only could we capture that debris, but we wouldn't cause flooding anymore. So that project is functioning. The way it's set up, it is set in accordance with DEP regulations to let water through. It's not intended to catch small debris. It's intended to catch the very big things. The things that get wedged underneath the bridges. When you get wedged underneath the bridges, then we have significant flow.
So there's a lot of, what is that Japanese knotweed?
Yes.
Right all along there.
Yes.
And one of the things that I noticed, both in the 2 times that we flooded in the, had high water, not flooded, high water, that there's a ton of that knotweed in the trash rack. It's also down here at the corner of Baldwin Street. I mean, I know it's difficult to get rid of.
It's an invasive species.
It's an invasive species, it's next to impossible.
And it's something you don't want on your street beds.
No.
Right.
Unfortunately, the only way to get rid of it, proper way to get rid of it is you actually have to cut it down to the ground, then spray it. And it'll suck, when it's trying to recover, it'll suck the poison. If you just spray the stuff as it's tall, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, you have to put individual droplets in each individual stalk
Yes.
in order to kill it. We did a project up north, it's called Murphy's Bottom, Duquesne University. I owned the property and they had a pilot project that had knotweed all over it, but they actually had to cut it, stalks stick up about a foot and then they drop killer down it, basically, it kills the knotweed.
Very labor intensive, it's the only way.
Is it something that should be getting, I mean, is it something that should be eradicated?
Yes. Anywhere we can get rid of all the knowledge, we want to get rid
Did we not try that before we did lower the park? Did we not, or we just cut it down?
Probably just cut it.
Okay.
of
And that's what we mostly see, is communities try to maintain it.
Right.
By keeping it cut down. It's very difficult to keep up with that.
They grow very, very fast.
That's something that-
And it will grow through asphalt.
Right.
We got pictures.
All right,
So, those are the projects that are completed. Right now, we have a project ongoing, should be done sometime, hopefully sometime this week. Janeway, the wall was constructed to prevent water from backing on the Janeway as much as possible. Problem was, there was no access to the Fire Hill Bridge where the center pier is, where a lot of stuff gets filed. Which 2 weeks ago, there was some few on that were caught up there. So what we're doing is, and this was started before we were involved, but then we took it and got the permit finalized, got it out of construction, building a ramp down in the creek. Part of that ramp is called a sort of flood log system. It's a plastic log system that Public Works can easily lift out. It's a gate system, would be by not a wide gate. It's watertight and it's very simple. The back of just pick up these little plastic gates, and then they can drive down and pull the equipment out, pull the debris out, and get it out of the stream area as quickly as possible. Having to try to navigate around the wall, or the top of the wall, tear the wall out and put it back. Or anything like that. So it gives us a maintenance facility in that area, at least short term. So that's the project as we sit right now. Obviously, when we got hired, the Corps just finished their flood study, and we got a full copy of it. And as well as that, we started doing some analysis separately from that, down at the bottom section from Laughlin Run up to Commercial Street. So I started getting a quick idea of what how the stream was functioning. So I'm going to start off with some work. There it is. Well, too far. There we go. Okay, so this is a map of borough. The red lines, the next one, which is not the brightest thing for us to see, but the red lines is the floodplain per the FEMA flood study, flood insurance maps, flood study. It shows what's in the floodplain. This is based off of at the time we used to call it the 100-year storm. It's now called the 1% storm event. That is the typical storm event for flood study analysis and for FEMA to identify what properties need flood insurance, et cetera.
Hey, Joe, show us where we're at, right?
Sure.
To give everybody a.
That's work perfect. So we are sitting right here. This is the borough building right here. Okay. This is the back channel Chartier Street right here. And then Laughlin Park, so right
Where's the rink at?
The skating rink?
Yeah.
Right there. I'm sorry. So, just give you a perspective of what's been going on. Because if one's flooding, and then they're saying, oh, we got this, we got that. A standard 100-year storm event is 4 to 5 inches of rain over a 24-hour period. What occurred 2 weeks ago was really interesting, and it actually showed what the flooding problem is here very well, is Bridgeville didn't get much rain. Maybe 4 to 4 inches over 4 to 5 inches over a 24-hour period. Depending on where you're at, it varies between 4 and 5 inches. You go up toward Erie, it's 6 inches per hour. It's got a moving, but for us, it's 4 to 5 inches. But what happened 2 weeks ago? Bridgeville got maybe half inch, not a lot of water rain. It stopped raining for the most part. Then all of a sudden, the wall of water came down. What happened was, Bethel Park Company, St. Clair, got 3 inches of rain in less than an hour's period of time. So when you extrapolate that, it kind of equates to like a 200-year storm event. It really isn't a 200-year storm event, as we know, a 200-year storm event was the pure volume isn't there necessarily, but the rate comes so fast, so quickly, that it just instantly runs off. It doesn't matter if you're a 100% wooded community, or if you're a community of Walmart parking lots. When that rain comes that fast, it's running off, it's gonna create flooding. I use Fox Chapel as the best example of that. Fox Chapel in the past few years has had a lot of significant flooding in Squaw Run. They're a wooded community. There is not a lot of pavement in Fox Chapel. They still flood. It's because trees are great to absorb water. Trees are good. But when it comes that fast, trees take time to capture water. So they have to have time for the ground to absorb that water so they can grab it and drink it up. If the ground doesn't have time to absorb the water, i.e. 3 inches of rain, time, it's going to run off. So understanding that, and understanding that a lot of the storm events we're getting now, everyone gets upset because another 100-year storm. Well, it's not actually a 100-year storm. It's a high rate, short period of time. That's what we're getting now. That's kind of, everyone uses terms climate change and all this different stuff. It is a form of climate change. The storm events have changed how they're hitting us right now. It's going to change again. It's going to change 30 times in the next 20 years probably. But that's what we have to deal with right now. And it rolls right into the flood study. And basically, these storm events are creating what the flood study shows for a 100-year storm event. So they kind of equate, but it's different animals. So everybody understands when you talk about the flood studies and the 100-year storm event, and what we've had recently, it's not a 100-year storm event, but it's a equivalent event.
What everybody remembers is the hurricanes. You get these long duration rains, and after Hurricane Agnes, FEMA got very active. And they created all these maps over the last 50 years, 60 years. So these red lines, for people in the community, they're going to say in the last 10 years, people in that red line have seen water. They flooded. But it wasn't from a hurricane. It wasn't from Hurricane Ida. I'm sure everybody flooded Hurricane Ida. The difference between then and today, as John indicated, we get these very compressed storms that are very isolated. They're in a single watershed. Like the storm you described in Fox Chapel was real similar to the storm event that you had here, that it was an upstream event. The two communities seen the rain, but the other two watersheds in that same community, they seen almost no rain. They didn't get hardly anything. The difference there was, and where the rate comes into this at such a high point is that was an entirely wooded watershed. It's only got 2 roads in it. The houses are on 10-acre lots or bigger, massive estate lots, almost all wooded. But yet they have a football field real similar to yours. They had 5 foot of water coming across it. It was 150 yards wide. downstream, O'Hara is just like Bridgeville downstream, very constrained. A lot of walls, a lot of things happened over the years. People filled in, people put walls, temporary stuff. All that stuff got ripped out. Houses had 6 foot of water in them. Businesses had 6 foot. People were stuck in their cars the whole 9 yards. But it was the intensity of the rain. It wasn't that it rained for a day and a half. It was it rained for 4 hours, and that rain was massive amount of rain. It's 5.5 inches of rain. Well, it becomes then it's not necessarily a stormwater issue. Like we look at retention, we look at ponds. For Bridgeville, and John's going to get to this. This is strictly a conveyance issue. We need to get water through town. This is not we're going to build a pond upstream. It's not that necessarily in the next 10 years, Upper St. Clair is going to change all their regulations and they're going to build 100 ponds. And they're going to, a rain event like the other day is going to get withheld back. That can be part of a long-term solution. You definitely are going to want to have that discussion. But to fix the problem here and to take those red lines and shrink them as close as you can to the stream and eliminate as many parcels as possible from getting impacted is going to be the solutions that we go over. Each one of them is a little bit different. In the end of the day, it's really going to talk about as a conveyance solution. How are we going to get the water from the top of town to the bottom of town? And if you look at history in the area, that's what everybody's done. That's what Johnstown did. Johnstown built walls from one end of town to the other, and they've only flooded twice in the last 50 years since then.
So on McLaughlin, from McLaughlin Park down to the Baldwin Street Bridge, during 2018, McLaughlin Run Road got flooded, almost to the complete other side.
Yep.
So,
That's what the map shows.
and what you're saying though is that if we improve the conveyance of the water, that, I mean, what caused that part of Bridgeville to flood? Was it the conveyance of the
The
water?
amount of water that come down from upstream plus the amount of water that was here, plus you had multiple structures that clogged. And the first two things that John talked about, the sandbars down to the beginning of town, need to be maintained. Like we just fixed those, the borough did. If you let those go for 3 years and never look at them and don't continue to maintain them, then it's gonna help create a problem in the future.
And you got a DEP permit to do
You can
that?
keep cleaning those out. Yes.
And we also got we got a new permit to do dredge underneath Commercial Street as well, so it can get cleaned out. So you understand, there's about approximately 173, we call them occupiable structures in Bridgeville Borough that are within this red envelope. There's some sheds and stuff. We didn't count them. We counted the occupiable structure. There's 173 that, by FEMA's analysis, we see flood. And based off of all the things we've all observed, it pretty much matches up. You indicated the Laughlin Road was flooded. Flood study shows that. It shows the houses on the high side of the Laughlin Road get impacted during a 100-year storm as it sits today.
Now you may find too, because they've updated the maps over the years with information from communities, you may find there's houses that you know is flooded that aren't on that map. And you may see houses that you don't think's ever flooded, and they'll be in that map. We have municipalities that their building will show up as being in the FEMA flood map, and we know for a fact there's no record that municipal building ever flooded. So it's not perfect because they use the mapping from USGS, John.
Originally, they used USGS, yes.
And now they use GIS, but over the years they've tweaked it, but it's not an exact science. The model's not exact. It comes from Army Corps because it's only as good as the mapping, because they do this for the whole country. So this isn't like pinpoint mapping, but it's very representative from what we can tell of what happens here.
Okay. So as I indicated, 2019, the Army Corps issued a general study that they performed. This was not for just McLaughlin Run, but it was also for communities over in Oakdale and that area as well, because they have been getting crushed as well. That study started with the FEMA's initial flood study that was performed back in the 70s. And they took and then used LiDAR information, updated the sections, updated the model. It's still based on the same hydraulic concepts. So it's the same base flow under your storm event is used in the model. It's just an updated model using the HEC-RAS program, and they provided a number of analyses. You can see there's the two areas of weather, the two study areas they did. The smaller one is the portion of McLaughlin Run through Greenville Borough. They stopped the study just beyond the municipal line. Basically, right at the properties I looked at to do a detention facility that our options were discussed. That's where the model started. So that's the extent of their study. They came up with a few options. They looked at a few things. First thing, obviously, was structure buyouts. In their analysis, they said, "Oh, buy these 16 structures. It'll solve the flooding for those structures." Okay, sure, that's an option. Dredging the channel. Now they said, "Okay, we'll model it. We'll dredge the channel. We'll take the channel down a foot, 2 foot. It says it'll resolve 24 structures. Those 24 structures are really the outermost ones on the outside edges that don't get flooded all the time. They get flooded once every 20 years or so. But it will solve 24 structures. The problem with that is you're controlled by the back channel from Chartiers Creek. You'd have to dredge from Chartiers Creek all the way up the back channel, then all the way up the Laughlin Run, and you're still limited by the elevation of Chartiers Creek and how far you can go down. So dredging does not get you the volume you need. It can help. It shows it helps, but it does not get it.
The other thing they note in all their analysis is that permit, and they look at dredging on all their studies, but they indicate right in there, they don't believe you're going to be able to get a permit to do that because the Army Corps nor DEP issues that permit. They can clean the channel. They have a permit to get that channel. They can get it clean, but it doesn't go up this far. You're outside the limit. So they did the same thing in each analysis, Oakdale, all of them. It says that that's an option, but it's not an option. It's likely because to get a permit for that entire length to disturb all those environmental resources is very unlikely. That they're going to say, go ahead and take 3 foot out of this entire stream. It's just not something that they do readily. They will on a study channel that's like through Scott Township in that area, through Collier, because that's a constructed channel. They're just reestablishing where it was supposed to be. Coming through communities such as this, they'll give you small areas, but even removing a gravel bar, they'll only let you take it down to the limits of where it was originally. They won't let you come up through and dredge the hole.
6 inches above water surface. Normal water surface.
And that's hard to get through. It's not an understandable item for communities because a lot of communities can remember walking under bridges, and now you can't. But you can't get a permit to take the whole area out. You can clean your culvert like you did here, but you can't go 500 feet downstream and keep doing that. They don't think you do that.
Yeah, where clean the culvert. So when the culvert was put in, that's at the base level, right?
Yeah, they said when that culvert was put in, it probably was 6 inches to a foot that the water ran through from where the surface was. It wasn't like you've seen, like when we did our first walkthrough that day, I mean, there was 4 or 5 foot on one side. It obviously wasn't that way, but it was that way up and downstream. Now, so far, since it's been cleaned out, it's staying pretty well cleaned out. So that seems like it's working. The velocities are keeping up. But yeah, it was down at that level, not nearly what it is today.
And another item that isn't discussed in any of the studies is we're stuck with the sanitary interceptor right down the stream. We have pillboxes sticking up in the creek everywhere, which are obstructions, which slow water down. There are 2 manholes in the culvert underneath Commercial Street. So, and they stick up. They're not flush with the stream bottom. So,
And long term, that will go away. Again, that's a hard pill typically to swallow, But we know that there's a project going to happen on the sanitary sewer, and it will get moved. They will not leave that sanitary sewer on the street. It will get moved. It's gonna be bigger at the end of the day than what it is today. But for right now, which is probably a 10-year out project, but it's gonna be in our lifetimes. That you're gonna see that sewer moved because it's part of the current planning discussion. That's one of the items that sewer gets discussed every month. It's on the Alcoasand list. There's a big group that talks about it. And right now, they're not asking for big parts of funding from the communities. I think they want to try to make that happen. It's not a big commitment from the current community. So, but that will be a process to get it moved. It needs moving. It's an absolute structure.
So next option they looked at was a detention basin in Churches Park developments. Basically, what they proposed, what we did, with the exception that they left an embankment in and tried to detain it. However, what they modeled is 3 times the size of the ball field. So they've been digging into the hillside, and it's by 9 acre feet of soil. The model showed about 20 structures, say, would be pulled out of the flooding. Again, that's perimeter structures, not the right along the stream, would have been exhausted. And they also looked at Bower Hill Road and the Commercial Street bridges. In their model, they said Bower Hill Road didn't by itself doesn't solve any problems. Model-wise, practically, we know if we get rid of that center column, we won't get the obstructions catching there, which is causing backups. Those backups will affect all the way to the Blackmore Park. Same with Commercial Street. Their model showed 4 structures would be helped by this. Interesting, when I started running the models, Commercial Street doesn't have as much impact if you solve stuff downstream, just but by model stance, actual stance again, removing the double culverts, making it a single culvert, removes its center structure, prevents the chance of obstructions. Right now, there's not a lot of obstructions with that one because they always get rid of Bower Hill, which is the first one to catch. However, if we fix Bower Hill and Commercial's left as it is, it's going to be the next. It'll be one that start to catch stuff. Just nature of how flooding works.
So Bower Hill, it comes up quite often at the meetings. And Joe and I talked about the last meeting. Yeah, absolutely, we want to push the county that bridge gets replaced and gets replaced without that column in the middle, because that's one of the steps along the way. And we want somebody, you want somebody else to pay for that, to make that happen. So, and then if that happens, Commercial Street has a useful life anyway. At some point in the next 20 years, it's going to be replaced. So that's something you could program over time, because it's a structure that's eventually has to get changed out anyway. It's not a similar structure as what you have at Bower Hill, where you know that structure's been there since early 1900s.
I think it's the 20s.
Yeah, 1920. So that's a 100-year-old bridge. Commercial Street obviously isn't. It's probably people remember that being built. It's here. So.
It's corrugated metal. It's got different 50 years. So 50 years they start on it.
Or Commercial Street, they change it, it's gonna go another 100 years, we wanna make sure it doesn't have that problem.
So if Alcoasand takes care of the manholes or whatever.
Yep.
So, does that affect the Commercial Street Bridge span or whatever?
No, because they'll just move it into the roadway, they'll go around.
So what we did when we got brought on to look at this was we looked at the Army Corps model. I reviewed it thoroughly. I got into the actual model and reviewed the model and started, so I understood it. Kevin and I walked the community with a number of council members, discussed a few of the areas, discussed the stuff that's occurred over history, stuff that I remember occurring as a kid when I lived in this area, and everything. Everybody was on the same page with things that were occurring. So then I got into it and I dug into the model and started looking at options. Identified critical restriction points and developed some things we want to look at. So we wanted to look at earthen levees. We wanted to look at structural levees, like wall systems that can keep the water within the stream channel. Bridge removals, replacements. What's the best scenario? We went out of the box. I looked at it. I modeled couple flood control tunnels. So you build a tunnel from McLaughlin Run to Chartiers Creek. We threw that, after I pulled we were talking about this before the meeting, after I pulled the mine maps, I said, yeah, that's not a good idea. When we put a tunnel right through the mines, other problem we have with that is because of the elevation of the back channel of Chartiers Creek, the tunnel will be full of water, and we've got plenty of food in. So if we had free flowing downstream, they work. If you don't have free flowing, they don't have the efficiency that for the cost. And then the last one is we'll look at some other options for detention basins. Last time we met with you guys, that was something we discussed, and we added a scenario of a detention facility out upstream of McLaughlin Run, or upstream of Greenville Borough. Sorry. So I mentioned the restriction points. Primary restriction points, obviously, Chartiers Creek's back channel is one of the key ones. I've mentioned it a number of times. We talked about Commercial Street. It's a restriction point. So is Bower Hill Road because of the center columns. You can see the pictures. There are the two center columns. The one on Bower Hill is really starting to look a little bad. It's the county's going to have to get to that picture sooner than later. Baldwin Street, it's another significant restriction. It's a single opening, but it's a very small single opening. The model shows the elevation of the creek upstream of it and downstream drops about 3 feet through the bridge. So it's restricting the water so badly, it's creating a hydraulic jump through it. The water backs up 3 feet above the bridge on the outside and then drops down, it's through it. So obviously it's only large vents, it backs up, it goes into the roads and it floods the adjacent roadways. So we can get that opened up, that lowers the water up that portion of McLaughlin Run for the houses between McLaughlin Run and Maple Street. And then topographic limitations. What do we have to work with? We have our nice, what was before it was developed, a nice floodplain with steep vertical slopes. That's Western PA. It's steep vertical slopes. Then we have a floodplain, and we developed all the floodplains. That's where we want to live. That's what we have to work with. So those are the restrictions I looked at when we did the model. So for detention, some of the stuff we have to think about. Detention base. Okay, one, you need an adequate area to do it. In the borough, there's not adequate area to do a detention facility of the size that you need to have any significant impact on the stream. Like I said, the Corps used the area of McLaughlin Run Park. The volume that they used was 2.5 to 3 times the size of the ball field area. They had 9.4 acre feet of storage, which was about 6 acres of property, 4 to 5 acres. We don't have that there. So you'd be digging into the hillside, digging houses that are on top of the hill. The entire park would be lost.
Yeah, they likely took the whole park and made the whole park go away, plus the hillside. Obviously, that goes well beyond what the borough would consider. Losing the fields was a big step. To lose everything up there is probably out of the question, the amount you put into that park.
And with the way we have it now, part of the field is not necessarily lost. It's a general activity field, once it's cleaned up and everything. But it'll take maintenance to do that, but it can be used as a general activity field. It looked really nice. It was nice and green and flat. It looked great. So there's a bunch of debris. I mentioned the flood control tunnels and the reasons why we didn't proceed with that any further. It wasn't practical because of the mines and the nature. Obviously, we discussed the Bower Hill Road center column restriction. It's more of a practical impact than a water impact. We know when stuff comes down, it gets wedged in. Baldwin Street, I discussed the issue with it. The bridge deck is low, it needs raised. The opening also needs to be wider. And then Commercial Street, one of the biggest problems with Commercial Street when we first started was sediment deposition. Public Works did a great job. They cleaned out a lot of that sediment. So now it's actually functioning a lot better. And until the Bower Hill Bridge gets corrected. I don't think we see too many more issues with that one. Once that bridge is corrected, now it's only one that's going to be catching things.
You do want to pay attention to Commercial Street, keep both culverts open. I mean, after rain events, they definitely need inspected, by Borough Public Works and keep them clean so that we don't have an issue that you get a back-to-back rain event and you got one tube that's full. Now we have a problem where we've got 50% capacity or 60%, and that just backs everything up. Then the problems upstream get worse.
One of the important things we want to say, practical sense versus moral sense. Important thing that I understand on Commercial Street, why you don't necessarily see it causing as much of an impact as well, is because you have Bower Hill Bridge, you have the trestle, and then right after trestle, the Commercial Street Bridge. Right? So in hydraulic terms, for hydraulic jump, when it gets through the Bower Hill Bridge, the velocity of the water speeds up, so it drops in level, shoots through there like a shotgun. It gets through all three bridges, then it slows down again and then backs up, and that's when we start flooding the borough building and the bowling alley with the skating rink. So we came up with actually 5 options. We would call 4 options. There's option 1 and option 1A, which is a slight difference. We'll get into that here. But a lot of these options, the first 3 options, or really 4, we broke out into 3 phases. Now these can be broken up into more phases as money's come available and everything, but we looked at it in 3 phases for costing as well as impact, to see what it would do. And what started this whole thing, and for me, when I got into the model, is the first thing I did was I ran a model to put a levee wall from the skating rink up to Commercial Street. First thing I looked at before we even got into the actual flood study of the project, I started looking at first. And by putting a soldier beam aligning levee wall in basically at the top of the slope, straight down, cleaning that area out where there was a slope, you actually gain volume in the stream, as well as get a levee wall that prevents the water from overtopping and getting into the property. And it, so it's solved flooding. But what it also did was it dropped the water surface elevation of the stream. So as soon as we start looking at this, okay, that was important. So phase 1 of option 1 is a levee wall from skating rink to Commercial Street. It includes installation of backflow preventers on the existing storm sewers so that the stream doesn't back up and bubble up. That's something that occurred at the 2 weeks ago. It bubbled up in the inlets, and then it started flooding the roads.
Commercial Street.
On Darby Way. Darby Way.
Oh, okay.
Darby Way experienced the flooding before anybody else did. Came up to the inlets. It's just that much lower than the rest of the roads. It started flooding first. But now, okay, so we put backflow preventer. Well, on the rain that falls in that area, it's got nowhere to go. Those backflow preventers keep the stream from coming up. Streams prevent the storm from going out until the stream drops back down. So part of that is going to be I'm going to put some screw pumps at the outfall. So it's outfall. So there's 2 screw pumps up on the map here. So you can see this in a second. And then phase 2 was from Bower Hill Road to Baldwin Street. And then phase 3 was from Maple Street to the park entrance. So option 1, or phase 1 rather, as we discussed, there's two screw pumps. One down at the skating rink, and one just upstream of, and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the building, the industrial building. That's next to adjacent to the skating rink, that little industrial area there. Just upstream of that is where the outfall is. So that's where we put the screw pump in. Reroutes the storm source into the screw pumps. What will occur is when the floods come up, screw pumps kick on, pick up the water, throw it over the top of the wall instead of trying to push it through the creek. So it goes down the creek, water's in that corridor, and for all intents and purposes, that portion of the community stays dry.
what does that do to, towns further away from us? Where all this water has to go somewhere, right?
Downstream.
Downstream.
Yeah, the flood channel takes into account that this water gets through the berm as far as the amount of water that gets here. Right now, what happens to it is it goes overland, it still gets there, but it's wide going through. We're gonna create the volume with height on the channel, and then these screw pumps, because you've got these lower areas, you're just lifting your existing storm system up over that wall. So your walls, like Joe's computer, that's your stream channel that's higher now. It used to be like that bulk down below, so we're gonna raise it up. Water's gonna be in the middle running through here, and then these pumps just lift it up over, and they've been around for 100 years probably. It's original technology, but they move a lot of water quick. Anybody that has a flood control project, they use screw pumps because they move a large volume of water and they're simple to maintain and operate. And John will show you the picture. It's basically a big pier.
Downstream in other.
It's not gonna, no, it's not gonna increase flooding. In fact, this corridor does not, this part of the corridor does not change the flood elevation significantly. We're gaining the reduction in flooding, not necessarily by the wall, but by the removal of the slope. We're gaining volume in there, so that the elevation really stays, it drops, I think it's like 10 to 2 tenths in some areas, that's it. The wall goes up above that because in order to meet FEMA's criteria to, if the borough would like to remove those houses out of the flood study so they don't have to pay flood insurance anymore, the wall has to be a certain height above the pool. So under your storm elevations at 1180, the copper wall has to be 1183 to qualify. So if we're going to do this, we're going to recommend that you go into that elevation. That way, anyone that's between that has the ability to get the deduct on insurance, so they're not paying so much flood insurance.
And DEP will have us look at that. You file for a permit, we have to show what the flow was before and after. And if there's an issue, we have to attenuate it upstream. So, I mean, they're just they're not going to issue this permit without them in the Army Corps without all that being vetted.
And not that we're doing is proposing to increase runoff. It's just conveying it. Or one option is just, is that an earth wall? Or is that a sort of lining? It's steel columns with concrete in between them.
If you had a lot of area, we've done them where we do earthen, but it takes a lot of room. This is an area where you don't have 50 foot to make a large berm that
You'll
has
see it
a cell.
in phase 3 when you have a section of earth proposed, at least shown. Again, it's obviously just a lot of things to do. So you understand this phase 1 of option 1 is $3.9 million. Yes, it did. And that's because you see prices like I adjusted the price.
You can thank me for that, by the way. I looked at John's cost, I said, I don't know, I just did a bunch of stuff, we better make sure we're.
Yeah, we compared it to
Still
current bidding and everything is actually up. Okay, so here's that phase. As I indicated. There we go. So the wall starts right here and comes all the way up to here. All that green area, that's additional volume in the stream that we don't have today. So we're going to gain floodplain basically, so that we get that volume that we're stored to that water, convey it instead of conveying it in the streets, we're conveying it in the stream.
So the wall's on the left side of that,
Yes.
where the green is.
That's it. So we have a screw pump right here, screw pump right here. There'll be what's called tide flex, duct bill attached to the pipe, lets water out, doesn't let water in. They're very efficient. Small amounts of rain will actually get through them, and the stream will come back up through them. So that is phase 1. Now, there's a blow up. You can see better the reroute of the storm system So we're gonna catch the storm first, come out here, take it up to the screw pump, get it discharged through, pump it over, or the storm vents. You can see, you can better see the green areas that are gonna be now storage water, we don't have now. Okay, that's what a screw pump looks like. It's a very simple design, but works great. Our ancestors really didn't do what they thought about with screw pumps. They do a lot with a lot of energy.
You have to put emergency power on. We got emergency generators, because in floods, a lot of times power goes out in areas, so each one will have an emergency generator with them. But they're pretty simple. It has a motor, has a big auger basically that lifts the water out, and your catch basins are at the bottom left, and then it dumps it out at a higher elevation into the channel. So it's pretty simplistic design.
So for maintenance of generator equipment here, what is the annual cost for maintaining a generator? You have to have a contractor.
Generators today, they used to be this way, but today they're pretty simplistic. You can get a maintenance plan. Like anybody has a lift station, pump station, things like that, communities. They used to have operators that took care of all that stuff. But now any of the generator companies, they'll come out and they'll do monthly maintenance on it. Public Works gets trained to go out and make sure that every day it starts up, you're supposed to run for so many minutes, just to make sure everything's working on it. It'll have a SCADA system on it. It'll report back to Joe. They'll be able to open it up and look at it and make sure everything's working. Because today they're computerized as far as monitoring goes. The screw pumps themselves, that motor at the top, it'll have maintenance like any motor, electric motor that you have. The screw pump itself, it's just a big auger. It's just an industrial piece of equipment. You'll work on it, but Coriopolis, their first maintenance in '72, we have a couple contracts now we're putting together. They've done very little to it over the years. Now, I can tell you they should have did more. They kind of left it go because it wasn't needed often, but now it's needed more. So they've been doing more maintenance to keep it on running.
So, but I mean, annual maintenance, we're talking about a couple thousand.
Generators a few thousand, because it's an oil change once a year, and then it's just making sure it runs. I'd say $2,500, something like that.
Per generator?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the screw pump itself, we would have a maintenance plan that you would set up, put money into an account every year, whatever it is, $3,000, $5,000, something like that. It'll build up to at 20 years when you got to change out a motor. The money's sitting there. A lot of people try to do that in reverse. When it breaks, you find the money. I'd rather see the communities with stuff like this. You set up and you put a little bit in each year. When it comes time to replace it, you have a cash sitting there. Just do a dedicated account for it. So.
Okay. Phase 2, again, from Bower Hill Road to Baldwin Street. We're gonna continue that thought process because we're so tight. We're going to build levee walls on both sides of the street there. We're gonna eliminate the sidewalk from Bower Hill Road. We're gonna promote a different pedestrian traffic route down Baldwin Street and reconnect it. It's not gonna be an option to walk down there. Even with the road closed Thursday and Friday night, when they're doing the paving, that sidewalk is not a good situation as it sits. So our recommendation, we're gonna get rid of it. We're gonna create a different pedestrian corridor. We're gonna replace the Bower Hill Bridge. We're going to, as part of this project, we included a price to completely reconstruct Bower Hill Road. The work that's being done, it's Band-Aids. There are bad soils deep underneath that, between the stream bottom and the subgrade of the road. There's bad soils there that over time causes them to move a little bit. But we're going to reconstruct that properly and they'll probably do concrete road instead of asphalt, because the asphalt just gets pushed by the heavy truck traffic. Mentioned the soldier wall. We're going to replace Bower Hill Road Bridge. We're going to replace the Baldwin Street Bridge. That's going to get raised about a foot, foot and a half. It's going to get widened a few feet. Greatly improves that opening. That eliminates a lot of the high waters upstream. Now that water, instead of jumping up 3 feet and then dropping out, it kind of just stays straight through and pervades through. And then there's 2 screw pumps along Baldwin Street that you can install as part of that project. One at Janeway and one halfway up towards Baldwin Street Bridge, where the outfalls are. This section is about $15 million cost. Important item of this is there are 4 properties that have to be condemned to do this. It only accounts for 2 structures being removed, plus some vacant lots now.
Yeah, this is bridge heavy in the cost, so you got a lot of millions in bridges, plus you got 2 retaining walls.
So Bower Hills, Allegheny County, Baldwin is Bridgeville.
Now, Bower Hill is Bridgeville from.
Some of the bridge.
The bridge, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yes.
And the 4 properties are in green area, John.
2 of the properties, let's see, just straight from the store. 2 of the properties right here that they get vacated, and then there is one.
I can't see that, John.
I can't see.
I think only you can see it.
That's interesting, okay. So 2 houses that are on Bar Hill Road there, just up across, heading from the church, those 2 would go, and then I believe it's one of the properties along, where Baldwin Street Bridge is would have to be. I think it's torn down, so it's been a lot. So 3 properties. There's a total of 4, I think it's a 3rd one in those. It shows up as a tax parcel, as a 3rd parcel. I think it's owned by one of the other 2.
I think one of those properties have now been demolished.
So,
In last year.
so as we indicated, we have to blow up during the police so we can see this a little better. So there's a replacement of Bower Hill Bridge, single span, right there, Janeway. We got a screw pump there, and we've got the backflow preventer. So backflow preventer is actually getting installed now. So that's also gonna help with current flooding, but it'll be installed, and then we'll put the screw pump in to capture water that's falling along the bridge. And then there's a revised Bower Hill Bridge. See how much pavement we're gonna have to install to adjust the grade so we can get over it. You can see the green area there, we're gonna how much volume we're gonna gain in the corridor. Phase 3, little different approach here. Flooding here is not as bad as it is, I use that term in quotes, as it is down in the urban area, more of a residential area. But there's still a significant area of flooding. So we're proposing a blend of earthen and structural levee wall through there, from Maple Street up to the entrance of the park. We're also proposing to do some additional modifications to the wall at Maple Street, raise us slightly more, putting a gate, just like we're doing in Janeway, on the ramp that we have for access into the creek there. Because right now, even with the wall there, what happens when the stream comes up, it backs up the ramp, backs up the road. And we can't block that right now because they're asked for maintenance. This section is another $2.5 million. So as you can see the green areas, those are the storage volume areas we're gaining. Just above the bridge, and I can point, but I mean, I see it. Unfortunately, I saw the cursor. Might be that. Let's see that will show up. It's not showing up. It's confusing. Joe's will. See if Joe's will. Yeah, Joe's will. Kind of. So that area, right? I can't. It's not cooperating. That area there is the earthen berm area. So instead of doing a actual wall, we're going to do an earthen now. Does the same thing as the wall. It's just dirt instead of the wall. So it's a little cheaper.
Why don't you show anything from Maple Street to Baldwin Street Bridge? What's the idea there?
They need to. Because of the improvements downstream, the water surface drops enough that it's not impacting the structures.
Cousins House got flooded in 2018.
Oh, it does now.
Yeah.
Because of the improvements we do downstream,
Okay.
it drops. Baldwin's, by dropping Baldwin's, by opening Baldwin's Bridge, you get a lot of fluid. And it drops the water surface. When we get to the results, we'll see how the maps change.
Now, some people's yards may still get water, in, but their structures, don't flood at this point.
I just asked, it's a whole city block.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Excellent question.
It was an excellent question, and it was interesting once I opened everything up, how the area backed off. So this is what the map looks like. After we put all those options in place, you can see how much smaller that red area is through the entire corridor.
This is revised FEMA flood map.
It's a revised flood map based off of what the model shows after we do the improvements.
And hypothetically, this could be what would reflect for those folks' flood insurance policies.
Correct. If we,
You do a map revision.
And that can be accomplished if this is done.
once all this work's done, then you go into dealing with the owner application, is what it's called. It's about a year and a half process to get through them, and and then they'll revise the map to look like this instead of how it does today, which had
So their premiums greatly reduced.
greatly reduced, because that is a three-tier increase on the flood insurance.
Yeah.
I think you're still in the first tier. but
So this would just capture the 100-year floods, the older 100-year.
The 1% storm.
Correct. So the old hypothetical 500-year flood is still something to be cognizant of. The mapping is going to reflect the 100-year to older flood.
Yeah, and that's why they make you do the 3 feet. 100-year is at the bottom of the 3 feet. Somewhere between the bottom of the 3 feet and the top of the wall is those really outlying storm events. That you get a 200, 300, 400, 500. I mean, they had a storm event in Philadelphia area a couple weeks ago. It was 1,000 there. And the governor flew there immediately and said this will never happen again. And all the engineers in the city said it should have never happened again. You can't say it will never happen. You can't spend enough money to make that not happen because it's 1,000-year event. It's
Every storm
incredible.
source would have the size of this room.
So, it was violent. I mean, it was horrific, the amount of water from down watershed. But it was one of those once in a lifetime events.
So do you take into, because I saw that NOAA just published their forecast for the next 10 years. And there's a considerable increase of rainfall and potential flooding.
That's what we discussed at the very beginning. It's not
Okay.
a different type of storm event.
Okay.
What they're forecasting is what we're talking about, 3 inches in an hour versus the 5 inches over a 24-hour period of time. This analysis basically will handle that 3 inches in an hour. If you get 4 inches in an hour, now you're talking a 500-year storm event.
Why aren't we just doing that? Why aren't we just being prepared for 20 years down the line? These weather systems continually adapt, continually change. We're seeing things that we're told aren't going to happen in our lifetime more and more frequently. Why are we preparing for that 1%? Why are we preparing for that 10%?
You can, but when we can look at those numbers. I mean, I called the other night. Somebody said on the call they want to look at a 500-year event. We're going to look at that. But the other 6 people on council, that it's going to be a guarantee. The number is going to go up so much that it becomes completely unattainable. So instead of having a project that goes by the standards that today have been set, because and climate change and what the numbers are going, everybody has a big opinion on this. But the easiest thing to do from an engineering perspective is look at the news every night and look at the last time the high temperature was, what it is, or the amount of rain we got, what it was. You're going to see 18 something, mostly 19 something. It's whenever they start keeping records. The amount of rain and the temperatures are typically not from 2020, 2019. This doesn't happen. there is some events in there, and I agree. We've seen some crazy stuff. We've seen some rain events that are abnormal for this area. But if I asked everybody how much rain this year, where we at, we had to be behind, I'd have told you that I thought personally we were ahead this year on rain. We're behind. We were behind 1.5 inches as of last week on the year. That seems crazy. We've had a lot of rain. I thought we lived in Seattle recently because it rained damn near every day. But the reality of it was we were behind. And that's why we can look at that for you, but by today's standards and with the cushion they make us put in, it takes care of a lot of that. But if you say to us, we want you to do the 500-year event, we can do that. The railroads did that. I don't know if you ever noticed railroad tracks in the flood.
I think it's the best way to correlate this, because we talked about that in Bridgeville Railroads, and I think if you can
Yeah.
correlate the 500-year floodplain to the railroad, if you can speak to that, I think that answers this whole
Yeah,
question.
the railroads didn't flood because railroads had endless amounts of money. They set the railroad tracks 500-year above, for the most part. You'll have an occasional, we'll find a 250 or so. But if you look at a railroad track and then you look at a state highway system, the state highway system has a beam that's about 2 foot thick. You look at a railroad track, it'll have a 6 foot I-beam on it that has more metal than anything else in town. Yours probably looks the same way because the railroad had endless amounts of money and they set everything at that rate because it did. Communities, the state, most of the organizations, they don't have that kind of funding to deal with because the calculation you get into, and we will eventually talk about this, but once you pick your option in your project, you then got to get into, okay, what's the value of the properties you're saving? If you get to a project and it's a $50 million project, if we take all 172 structures and we say, what's the value in it? If you took them all, you're likely never getting even close to that dollar value. Even when you add taxes in and everything, you just don't get there. We don't have any communities that take the structures. But the Army Corps, their study, most of their studies say take the structures. It's the number one thing they say because they want to eliminate the fact that people could fly. You know, they want to get rid of that. Where communities all look at how do we protect all these structures? You got 172 structures to protect. You can do it for a low enough number, that's okay. But if you get to this big, gigantic number that we're at $50 million, $60 million, now you start looking at that per structure cost, it becomes unattainable. Nobody will do it. So that's why at the end, you guys will get some questions from this because you're going to see this. And it was a good question. Why don't we do the 500? But nobody can afford it.
The other part of that is, okay, we can raise the walls and spend all that money there. We still have the problem of infrastructure in the borough for storm sewers is inadequate. All the South Hills, it's inadequate. So we need to spend that money, we should spend that money to get those sewers to be able to convey the water that falls on the road, off the roads for safety reasons. So there's a double-edged sword we have to think about when we're doing this. So option 1A, I'm gonna make this one real quick. The only difference between option 1 and option 1A is we replace Commercial Street Bridge here. So we can go through all this. The end result is there's a basically it's a $1 million increase to build the Commercial Street Bridge. So there's the bridge, which is too far. Apologize. Let's do it back now. Come on. It's locked up on me.
No, you're doing that. Does anybody ever recall seeing anybody walk Flowerville Street, Flowerville Road on the sidewalk?
Yes.
I was a kid, there was a couple that was walking yesterday.
Was that you?
No, it wasn't me. There was a woman with a little boy.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see one person. The bus line with it. So we're going down, it's not pushing the bus over here, on the road, over here, go down to the corner of the fire, and walk in there. So they'll come down, walk that way.
I think that's something in your active transportation study. you want to include so they know that there's a potential you want to get rid of it. So they can include, okay, how do we move people to where they need to be then? Because I think that's going to be an important component for them. Because that's a cost-effective option for you is eliminating that walk and gain that space for the floodwaters.
So that's again, the big change from option 1 to 1A is there's Commercial Street Bridge. It'd be a concrete pond span arch, single span arch. That allows them to make that bend. And then we'll just replace the roadway over top of it. Option 2 stays the same, phase 2 stays the same, phase 3 stays the same, and that option.
And this is one of those that it could be a single grant project. That no matter what, over time, you got to change that out anyway. It doesn't matter when you actually do it. The permit's pretty simple to get. And it could be one of those ones you put in for a grant and just do it. You could do it in the next 5 years, 3 years. You could do it next year and say, okay, check that off. That's one thing it's not. So just because it's an added item, if it's something that practically speaking, everybody here knows that's a better situation to eliminate that center, then we add that to the start looking for money options. It's an easy project to build.
Okay. Option 2, very similar to option 1 and option 1A. The big difference is the section between Bower Hill Road and Baldwin Street. We looked at this in a different situation. We made Baldwin Street a true pedestrian corridor. We eliminated the Baldwin Street Bridge and put a simple small pedestrian bridge over that area. Greatly improves hydraulics in that situation. Opens that corridor for pedestrians, put a cul-de-sac on Baldwin Street Bridge, or Baldwin Street ends there, and put a park. So it kind of creates that pedestrian corridor from the residential area down into town. Option 1 stays the same. Option 3 stays the same. It's that core in the center. You start looking at different scenarios in that situation. So, okay, 1 stays the same. So there's the cul-de-sac. You can see there's we show a little gazebo for reference, and there's this very small bridge there. That bridge, we put a few of these in Fox Chapel with fiberglass. 4 guys can pick them up, set them down, and they don't move. They withstood all that flooding that Fox Chapel's received recently. They're very durable, very easy to maintain. And
Yeah, they're public works building. They built them over the winter in their garage and then just took them up and set them because they were put together. It's kind of like an erector set.
How wide is it?
Those ones we go to 6 foot.
I think so. They're 6.
You can make them 8. We went 6 foot because we want to be pedestrian. We want to be trying to
Well, with the maintenance.
you snow blower. You have a little sidewalk plow, or depending on the community, obviously, you guys don't have you're not responsible for sidewalks, so you don't have a sidewalk plow. But with a snow blower in front. And to be honest, unless you have a lot of snow and it starts melting and freezing, typically there's no snow on it because it's raining 60. So other than that, the rest of the concept stays the same. Well above it, phase 3 gonna stay the same. And the flood map is basically identical for all 3 of those phases. It's taken, and we'll get to the solution, but it's eliminated all the impacts down from 173 to basically 0. It's not 0 because we've had to take a couple pieces of property to do this.
What's it cost from?
So, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Did option 2 include the redoing of our
Yes, yes, repaving, and if you notice, there, we actually reconfigured the intersection there at, McLaughlin one, yes, we wanted to improve that intersection there with that option. Because obviously, since you're not gonna go down Baldwin Street, we wanna make sure that that intersection will be a little safer than it is today. Okay, option 3, still following that same concept. Phase 1 stays the same. Phase 2 is where we get a lot different. So phase 2, we get rid of the Bower Hill Road Bridge. We get rid of Bower Hill Road. We reconfigure the intersection at Baldwin Street. We're gonna put a roundabout. We're going to we're gonna replace the Baldwin Street Bridge with a much bigger bridge. And then reconfiguring the intersection at McLaughlin and Bower Hill Road. Instead of doing structural living walls, we eliminated Bower Hill Road. And when you see we reconfigured the route on Baldwin Street to make a plus intersection instead of the offset we have today. We're going to do a earthen berm. We're going to actually prepare that. We're going to create a repairing buffer. So it's going to be vegetated buffer. It's going to be more of a park atmosphere through that area.
That's because you can widen the channel to get rid of water.
Yes. This option, just for this phase, is about 16.9 million. Key to this is to do this, it's condemn 37 properties. Now it creates a section of land that can be redeveloped after it's all done and probably be resold to a developer that would want to develop it. But 37 properties are going to be condemned. So this is not necessarily palatable, but it's something that's been discussed. This kind of matches up with the study that was done previously by the land planners for this corridor. There's the plan for that section of the corridor. You can see all the green space that's created. You can see the roundabout down at Baldwin Street. See how we rerouted Bower Hill Road into there so that you don't have that intersection that you have today. Well, you gotta stick your nose out to try to see. And you get up to the where Beer Distributor is. Beer Distributor is one of the properties that will be taken for reference purposes. The road would go right through the Beer Distributor. It would create a plus intersection, a safe intersection between Railroad Street, Baldwin Street, where it connects in the Bower Hill, and then the road comes up the hill, which I'll probably get off top of it.
So we're losing 6 businesses as part of this plan.
More than 6. Yeah, there's a significant impact.
Yeah, this is a big swing with a lot of impact of properties. This does kind of mimic what the planning document was that was out there. Traffic flow wise, you hire a traffic engineer, they're going to embrace this plan. They're going to say it's a great plan because it's going to fix the traffic.
Have problems in palatability on how many properties, how many
But it's
businesses you're going to.
environmental impact as far as businesses, economic impact, it's massive. And this one isn't just a dollar impact, 16.9. This eliminates a bunch of businesses.
Yeah.
They may flood today, but they're no longer here, so they go off the chart as far as that. But then you don't have your tax revenue. But you do, like, all directions. This fixes the traffic. Traffic's going to flow straight through the corridor. Now, like John said, you could have some redevelopment. You're not going to get much because it's going to be a busy corridor. You're not going to get the beer distributor to go in here and try to, put on land that may still flood, stuff like that. So, so this is an option that you kind of had sketched out already. So we did model it, we did price it, it does work. But here, as John indicated, it's got the biggest price tag. Both for what you see long-term and what it is now.
Socially, economically, and then the actual fee. And to be honest, fee, just if we ignore the impacts to property owner from the north, those type of impact, just pure cost, it's not that much more. Okay, it's 1 million more, but not, it's not like it's 20 million, 40 million, it's maybe a million extra. But the economic impact makes it, it's not necessarily palatable. At least not right now, it may become palatable. Hard to say, once the traffic study starts coming through.
And when you get the surveys done on this, you may impact 5 more properties, because when you get to both ends where the roundabout is on the other side, we're showing what we think is gonna get impacted, but once you did the survey, it may go up. You may have other businesses that you can't work with the grade of their buildings, they're just too low. Road's gonna be up here, and the houses and the businesses are gonna be down low.
Or maybe you don't lose those businesses, but then it's basically.
That was my question. Why aren't you swimming the road in earlier, having green space on the bottom side of the lot, instead of the business district?
I'm sorry, I can follow the question.
So you're taking the green space right now, putting it onto railroad, which is considerably the business district of Baldwin Street. If you swing it at the right, at the apex, and you start to make a curve over towards Bower Hill, then now you can keep all that land and make this bigger space, a larger green space, and a larger parking with the roundabout still there. And that wouldn't change your hydraulics. In fact, that might even help your hydraulics. Now you have more of a regional area to disperse the water as opposed to all this conveying. Now we're not getting anything in that space. And most of those businesses, or homes, I'm sorry, are up for redevelopment already, either through the light program or
Again,
FEMA. I'm just looking at just the quick.
it's a placeholder option, but there's tons of finding things we can do to every one of these options. Fine tune them, shift the road 5 feet this way, shift the road 5 feet that way.
I'm talking about 100.
Well, you're not moving it on. You can't do it, you can't put the road in the street there.
You've got, I agree with you. Nick, get up and just kind
Yeah,
of point
right.
out what you.
I don't know, you're coming all the way down here, then making a move. If you come here and you make your move now you're staying in this business district where we're getting a lot of, I'm getting tax money. Where down here, if we make this more of a, half these homes and buildings are already concerns, that makes this ability to be our green space, and we can save the business district, but, it's.
Well, the only way to do that, you'd have to make that Bower Hill road structure 3 or 4 times
Aren't you
longer.
already doing that?
No, you'd have to make it 4 times longer to get down. It's not, you can't do it and miss those businesses and not just put the road to reconnect up where the railroad track crossing is. That's what this plan does. That's what, you had a current plan, that's what it showed, is to reconfigure that. You would have to put more structure for the stream, because what you're saying is move the stream to miss like the beer distributor. If you do that, then you gotta have a bigger structure.
I'm not saying move the stream, I'm saying adjust the bridge or
Yeah,
add a bridge.
Yeah, you would have to move the road, like you're saying, to the north, but to do that, you'd have to have the stream under the road. So,
Which would be very difficult to be permitted.
Everything's very difficult.
Yeah, well, to the point of not possible. And the bridge structure would go from $2 to $3 million to $20 to $30 million.
Should you put like 100 yard culvert and put our whole road right over it? In your street?
In the past, yes, today, no.
Why not?
You will not, they won't give you the permit. You will not get the permit to do that. Today for it.
John. I'm like, it's not just up here, it's down here. You're constraining yourself to replacing the traffic on what is now Baldwin Street. And that's what you're constrained. You're not constrained by that. There's nothing that prevents you from leaving a Baldwin Street, moving this road, this up here, so that it's going more that way.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant by the fine tuning. We can shift the road
Right,
25 feet or
as
so.
Nick was saying, not 4 or 5 feet, but not 100, maybe more like 20.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's-
so that you've got a
that's all
beautiful area that's down here, that can thrive with green space and parking and
Yes.
just not a road, not a high-traffic roadway right against somebody's front door.
Or you're gonna have a high traffic road.
You're gonna have a high-traffic roadway, no question about that. You've got one right now in Bower Hill. It's gonna be a high-traffic roadway. The question is, do you put it right here in front of these people's front door, or you put it further up so that you've got green space and parking between, and now my front door comes out onto green space and parking. It is a beautiful neighborhood, it is a developable neighborhood, it is someplace I want to be, not just someplace that doesn't flood. Flooding is only one of the component parts.
Right. Fine tuning, that's a fine tuning of the optics, no question.
Right.
This, it doesn't change the flood study.
The hydraulic
That's what we're
study.
doing. We're worried about the flood study right now.
Right.
That is the next step.
And my other question was, is the curve because of railroad, or is it just,
The curve is to get your intersection, a nice safe intersection. Without doing a roundabout here too. so it's-
Right.
okay.
And we're just going to plus.
And we're limited, we can't do anything once we get to the tracks.
that's my guess.
Yeah, we're stuck with that.
We're stuck with that crossing, we're not, that
Will it improve the site?
greatly improve the sidewalks. That's the key. It creates a true plus intersection instead of the offset misery that we deal with every day.
And what this option does too is it gives you a natural stream channel. If you take the whole stream and you push it up tight to the rock cliff, right where Bar Hill is, then it gives you more room to put the road going through those backyards. But that's since all the costs go up, because now you're putting walls back in. So this option maybe goes to 20 million, but you end up with not Baldwin Street being the road, that Bower Hills just moved. So,
So like I said, we could actually do some behind the scenes. You can, like you said, we can bring it straight out through here and dump more, which would probably save one or two parts here, but the idea is to get the nice plus intersection for safety.
This is just giggles. Why do we need a bridge there? Why don't we make an alternate bridge further down towards commercial, going behind Silver's or something, over to commercial and then round out?
you have to get another track crossing, I would think.
That'd be another rail crossing.
And I don't know that you can get a rail crossing today. If it doesn't have a street with a PUC number,
Is
the
that
likelihood of them,
already get towards, or do we not shoot straight down towards Main?
yeah, if you had a street that had a crossing number, you can reopen them and do it, but if it doesn't exist, it's nearly impossible to get a new crossing.
No, there's not one down there.
There's no. I mean, yeah, that's, run the hell over it.
I mean, if there was, that's getting completely rid of the bridges. Possibility.
So I have a question about, so if we would go this route with the roundabout, that would take all of the trucks that normally would take the 45 long-foot trucks. It would take them off of Bower Hill by PJ's, take them to the roundabout.
PJ's will be there. PJ's will be there.
Okay. And then take it down.
Yeah.
Or
New ball.
New ball, which would be a bigger road, it would be as narrow as Bower Hill is, and the whole border would be.
And your placement of those buildings on the other side of the road, you could put a 20-foot green space down there, and you can put a service road. But when you do that, then you impact all the properties on the other side of the road, which is maybe okay. I mean, that, you have to weigh out which side of the road you want to impact.
Your hillside, the hillside of Baldwin Street would be beautiful. And I wouldn't, it's not the new Baldwin Street. It's a new road, and Baldwin Street as a nice little residential street still exists.
You can only do that. I don't want anybody to leave the meeting thinking that's possible unless you say all the properties between Baldwin Street and Bower Hill go away,
Right.
except for the commercial. If you're willing to say everybody goes away there, you can do that.
The creek side of Baldwin Street has to be sacrificed.
Yes. And then you can leave Baldwin Street just like it is, it would be a single loaded street then, instead of a double load.
Exactly.
So,
So we'd have the traffic on its own path. And what would be left on the hillside of Baldwin Street would be a beautiful area.
it would just be green space. It'd be a street, green space, and then on the other side of Baldwin Street, would be- which is okay.
Looks like I have to load it. Computer drive. There it goes. Okay, again, option 3 to change. Now, option 4, this was something that was discussed at the last meeting. Planning Commission was very interested in this. No. Okay, so there's the flood map. Very similar to the one for the other 2 options. Basically, all the properties are out of it, but we've impacted, greatly impacted. If we shift the road closer to the stream a little bit, same scenario, that land on the down page side of Baldwin Street / Bowerville Street, whatever we'll call it, would be out of the floodplain now.
And what makes the ground underneath stable enough to put a road as opposed to Bower Hill where we're having so many problems?
When it's constructed,
Okay.
Before you do that, we would have geotechnical analysis and to make sure that it's solid, if there's undercut that needs to be done. Like for instance, for Bower Hill Road, our cost includes digging down 4 feet and getting all that material out of it.
Is this not the railroad tracker here?
No, that's a cement plant.
That's a not that, okay. I was gonna say, I see an access road right there as well.
Yeah, now the railroad track is on the left side of the cement plant. And when you get to the end of the cement plant, it's a 100-some foot vertical cliff.
Thank you.
Option 4. There's 2 parcels in Upper St. Clair, up around the bend from T.A. Robinson, that are owned by a private property owner, but they're along the stream that, something 6.5 acres. We can get a 9.5 acre foot detention facility. That would be about 4 feet deep. The way it would work is if you build a large embankment, structural embankment, when a stream comes up, it dumps over into that and it contains water. There will have a small pipe at the bottom to let it drain out over time, but the idea is it kind of just fills in and fills up, shaves off water. Modeling that, it shaves a little bit of 300 cubic feet per second off of the total storm event, which is 1500. It changes to the community as we get close farther downstream, but somewhere around 1500 CFS to start with. That's what it looks like.
This is on the property that Sienna Woods or Tuscany.
No.
Tuscany Road.
No.
No.
No, this is a separate property owner.
I know, but is it in?
It's over the hill. We'd have to, our access to this for maintenance will be all the way up into that.
Okay, because that's where originally they were planning on putting their pole wet on our property. They were planning on putting the pole.
Yeah, that's this here, we're actually next plan out. We got this plan, we're next plan out here. So we're completely in upstate left, no bridge road involved in this at all. The substation, if you know where the substation is downstream of this.
Are you talking TA Ward?
No, this is, TA Ward,
Yeah.
then you have a little bit of land, then you have the substation,
Right.
and you continue upstream, then you get these parcels.
You're both right. There's a proposed development that came before us, maybe.
That was on the other side,
No, it's here. It's like 2 years ago. It's been a very long time.
The
It hasn't
substation
gone.
is being rented from TA Ward
Right.
as
Yes.
state.
Yes,
And then there's another empty lot that he owns with
Yes.
gravel and stuff.
yes,
Yes.
yes. This is on the other side of the road from
Is this the bottom of Richfield?
Yes.
Okay, then yes. Justine, this is the parcel that we were thinking, where Tuscany Point was going to be developed.
Correct.
In here,
Right.
the rec center was gonna be next to the cul-de-sac in Bridgeville. This is Bridgeville. The rec center was
The rec
on
center
this
was
side.
going to be off of
Correct, off of McLaughlin Run Road, but at the bottom of, on the Bridgeville side property of Tuscany. Okay, this is the same place, we're thinking the same place.
So that all being said, that's what it looks like. One of the keys to this is the access to maintain this would be an access road that comes all the way up and around up to the top area. It's shown on the plan there. And would access the road. But this would be fully up St. Clair. Up St. Clair would have to work with us, and obviously, and have to adopt them with this project. That will be taken to their properties that are in their community, the facility will be their community, in their community, and the operation and maintenance has to be negotiated between the people. That being said, that's what the flood map looks like with that pond in place. It shaves about, I think it's 73 or 74 lots out of the flood zone. But they're the ones that don't get hit every time. They're the outskirt ones. One that get impacted all the time, are still gonna get impacted. It doesn't, it can't, it's not big enough, it just can't shave enough water down to get it to the point. So as Kevin mentioned at the beginning of this whole thing, we come around circle. The key is we need to convey the water through Bridgeville. Putting the temperature in, it helps, no question it helps, it doesn't solve the problem. In the future, do we want Bethel Park and Claire to try to capture the water at the headwaters and release it at slower rates? Absolutely. But are we gonna, does Bridgeville Borough wanna wait until that may happen in the future?
I mean, the largest item with a facility of that size is, even though it does quote help these structures, these are not the folks that John indicated that last week got hit. They're still gonna get hit if you build that. And when you spend $4 million and say, what did I get for it? Well, people that flooded once in the last 20 years or 30 years who never come to a meeting, that's the people that are impacted, where the folks that live along the stream, that's the ones that's getting hit with a lot of frequency. Option 4 doesn't do it. Now, if you get a grant, multi-municipal for $4 million, and you get an agreement with those communities to do something, you don't have to maintain it forever. It's a good thing. But to do that and not some of the other options, it doesn't get you there, because people are gonna say you spent $4 million and you didn't help.
Yeah, you gotta say, you're gonna have
So that's,
$50,000 a year. Every time it's flushing, you clean it up. So here's a summary. This is the options 1 through 3 eliminates all the flooding. Basically, it doesn't eliminate it, but it reduces the risk. First two options, again, if you remember, I said it's 173 occupiable structures. We took 2 to build it, 171 are saved. Option 2, we took 6 structures, so 169 structures are saved. I should say we took 6 structures. There's 6 structures, I'm sorry. Option 3, again, we're talking about this. The increase for that roundabout and everything is really not that much, because while the work's the same. You can see it's only, what, $1.5 to $2 million increase from option 1. Option 4, it's gonna mention $4 million, but it's only removing 79 of the 173 structures out of the floodplain. good thing, but it doesn't solve the problem of people that are being flooded every single time. So that's the options we come up with, and we're able to perform analysis to see what the impacts are and what the cost would be. And as I indicated, that's a lot, big chunk of money, whichever option we choose. Doesn't have to be all spent at the same time, it's been done in phases. And there's a number of grants out there now that we have a study in place. There's a large number of grants out there that will be opening here in the near future that we can apply for. Monies for. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a few grants that open up every year or so. Obviously, with COVID, the granting systems are all kind of wonky. They're still trying to award grants from last year. But, so the new ones haven't opened. But Army Corps has 2 or 3 grants. FEMA has a mitigation assistance grant that we can apply for. CFA, the Act 13 monies, there is a flood mitigation program grant every year that we could apply for some monies. They also have the PA Small Water and Sewer Program. There is aspects of that that we could apply to this. CFA, the CFA also has a larger H2O grants. It's got a large variety of projects to go after it, but it's a grant we can apply for. Then you go down to the county, DCD has a number of grants that we could, DCD, GEDF grants are available. That's a lot of money that we're using right now to do Janeway and the park project, was GEDF grant. So the grants are out there and they're available. Now we have a study, once the borough picks a plan, we can start getting the permits and applying the grants.
And in picking the plan, I kind of read through everything again last week, all the studies. In my mind, it's the borough, like phase 1. Phase 1 doesn't change through all the plans. So to me, phase 1 doesn't change. You can't build phase 3, or you probably shouldn't until phase 2 Baldwin Street get done. So I'd break it into just those 3 projects. I would go aggressively for funding for phase 1, because if you build phase 1, which is the portion down here, it helps phase 2. Because we give more area downstream for the water to get through, get that permitted and built. While that's being built, because now you've got a project that got funded, you have a reason why phase 2 should get funded. By then, vet through all these questions tonight on Baldwin Street and have a series of meetings that you can discuss with the property owners, the ones that's impacted, what's best for them too, because if we move Byerville Road, we put these structures, we get rid of one side of Baldwin Street, maybe the other side of Baldwin Street has a big negative impact. I mean, you could get to the place where all Baldwin Street, the right answer is all the structures get raised, and you just change Baldwin Street, you fill the whole thing in, raise it 6 feet, and you put a new town. I mean, the amount of structures that you're talking about at the end of the day, it's not astronomical. So if you get phase 1 while you're building it, work to solve phase 2. What's the right answer for the borough? Because now you know what the flood numbers say. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about the traffic engineer. You're doing a pedestrian corridor. I mean, it may be as simple as ask Trans. Yeah, I think it's traffic planning. Ask them for an amendment to that to look at traffic through that corridor for you. Instead of going from one end of town to the other, how do we just get traffic through this corridor? See if they can look at it with pedestrians to give some guidance to planning commission. That may be a good idea. Because we got to solve pedestrians. If we get rid of the sidewalk, we're going to solve pedestrians, should we solve traffic and include that? And then come back with, okay, for phase 2, here's what we do. And phase 3, again, there's not many tweaks to phase 3. And phase 4, that pond, let's go start talking to our neighbors and see if we can get a multi-municipal grant and do that up front as well. So if you do phase 1, you do phase 4, you work on phase 2, because that's going to take a while. I don't think anybody here tonight knows exactly what you want to do with phase 2. Got a lot of good questions. There's 2 bridges involved. What's the county going to say? What do you want to do with your bridge? Because it's a lot of money, to maintain it. Because if you decide you don't want to maintain that bridge, then you just want to move traffic all to existing Bower Hill Road. Now Baldwin Street's a dead end, you don't impact any businesses. And there's no traffic on that road, and all your properties and tax bases stay the same. Do you want to do that as a community? You know, how's that impact you to get rid of Baldwin Street? Because now you're fixing probably just that intersection where your engineer tried to go out the other day and it was a T-bone. Because that intersection's tough to get through. I mean, it's just, everybody who lives here has to know that. So, so that's a bigger question. We know now what the answer is from the flooding side, but now you got this other question. What do you want to do? How many properties you want to impact? Do you want Baldwin Street to dead end? Do you want it to go through? Do you want to replace that bridge? Do you want to just have that be a, you know, more of a green space? Because it'll become, some of those lots can become green space parking. You know, I think you can answer those questions over a longer period of time, because phase 1 and phase 4 is going to take a little bit of time to get that funding set up. Now that you have the study, you can apply for all the grants. One of the requirements are you have to have a study. So you never had that. You have that now. You have options. Council, after planning commission vets this, can take it under consideration, pick the options for phase 1, 3, 4, and then phase 2, just say, we're going to kick the planning to figure out traffic, the flooding, and we know what the models look like that way while you're getting phase 1 built. Because then you're making a big impact for everybody. And then phase 1, check it off. You move phase 3 or phase 2. If you got phase 2 figured out, then you can Baldwin Street. So we have some ideas for Baldwin Street temporarily. We're not ready to kick them out yet tonight, but there may be some temporary pumps in your future just to get past some flooding issues that you have. There won't be screw pumps, but it's something at least for these quick events, Public Works could maybe use. Can't get them permitted, but emergency situation, maybe worth having on hand. So, and they're not that expensive. So there's some ideas we have there. So, would work with council. I think that would be a good way to move forward to show progress, because from where we started, I guess, year and a half ago, to today, you know, we got all the projects you had on your list accomplished, and now we're moving into the next phase, which was get this study done and then figure out what the next big piece was to do. And I think we've identified phase 1 is what to do, and keep maintaining everything that you've done. And program it every year. You're going to spend some money there. Public Works going to have a little bit of equipment. Could have the right stuff to maintain these items, but long term it'll pay dividends. It's a big deal.
So phase 1 is the cornerstone, basically.
Yep. Yeah, and what we found, and even with your park projects, I think you've seen this. You've been getting money because you successfully complete projects. I mean, you got a lot of funding in 18 months that other people didn't get because you were spending the money. You were successfully spending money on projects, and people can come out and see that you did this, and you did this, you did this, and that's a big thing. So your track record is now you're not getting the money and then not spending it. You're getting it, you're going to projects, you're committing local funding. You know, council has committed the part that was needed and continues to do so. So your track record's good from that standpoint. Any other questions of us?
Not right now.
You do ask John.
I do need to.
I live close, I can always stop that.
All right, what do we want to do? What do we want to do?
Like I said, I remember we watched the stream how many years ago. And, you know, what the difference is now between then and now. So it doesn't happen overnight. You know, and they do seem to be talking. It's, yeah, I think there's some good advice. It's just a matter of, you know, choosing whether this is what we go, we got to get the money. If we're gonna go out with money, we have to have this piece to go after.
Still,
No, do we want to take and recommend that we start, we recommend, option one of phase one. Move forward with that to the borough and talk, think about.
Yeah, it's all in their decision. Right. So we can easily, you know, in the option one, when you, it doesn't change. Right. It's pretty much consistent. Right. And, you know, that channel right behind it doesn't. So I think it's an easy decision to make, you know, because you're gonna have to fund anything. So that's all we're asking now, hey, $3.9 million to fix it. We're saying, hey, this needs fixed. We're gonna go after funding like we did in all our other projects. And we just think that we get money that should be done.
so we should recommend that we,
Make a motion to recommend that we move forward with
At least
option,
option one.
no
phase one.
all the offers. Phase one is the same.
Yeah.
With all the options. Except for 4.
And phase 4, multi-municipal, so you can start that process.
Yeah,
'Cause
start having
we don't know how
conversation.
long it's gonna take just to get everybody at the table even to talk about that, let alone even go after a grant, but at least if you could do that, because we know that's gonna take a while.
I mean, I think that's more of a conversation you have with our neighbors and see, is that something that they're willing to talk about?
Yeah, because if they're not to do it there, there's no sense even going for a grant, because
Yeah.
you gotta get land development approval. You have a whole lot of hurdles that you may not be able to get through. So at least, I guess, a recommendation to start that conversation. That would be a good idea.
You're talking about a piece of property that they're trying to, the developer's trying to sell,
That's right.
you know, for $20 million.
Right.
We all know the price tag of it, we all know it's supposed to go there, and it's, you know, we know we would like to see.
So that could be a quick no.
Yeah. So,
We might as well at least ask.
I mean, because from what their drawings were, they only had like 2 puny retention ponds.
yeah.
Yeah, they're bonded for their development only, it's not to help anybody else.
Right.
I think we need to bring in our state and county representatives to help us with that.
Is it the opinion of the planning commission that phase 4 should be considered by council? I think that's the question.
Yes,
I think that
to start the conversation.
to start the conversation.
We're not going.
So we're gonna, you're recommending phase 4, which was the Upper St. Clair detention facility.
Yeah, at least to start that discussion.
But like, when you look at options 1, 2, 3,
It's option 4, we're recommending that option 4, we can create it also, it can also be created as a phase 4 and the other.
but it's not needed. When you look at option 1, 2, 3,
It's not needed, but it's one of those ones that it can help.
And it can help with the larger stones, the 500.
It's not gonna hurt, that's for
Right.
Correct. And you're gonna continually have people ask the question, in our opinion, unless you vet that.
Yeah.
That it's,
How do you manage that undermining?
for that area.
Yeah.
It would, you would have to stabilize it when you did the pond so that you don't put more water into it. So it has to be part of the project, stabilize it. So, which is doable, and it's unfortunately here, we have a lot of mines in this area, so.
Right.
Was that part of the price tag?
Yeah, to stabilize it, because they're on.
The mines are actually, most of the mines are just above creek elevation, not below. Some of the deep mines are, but most of them, they kind of daylighted right in that area.
But if you look at budget wise, option 1A is $23 million. And option 4 is like,
4 million, so it's 27 million total.
so it's 27 million total, but this whole project would be done and save up all the structures for 23 million. I just don't understand how this is.
It's kind of belt and suspenders, because people drive past that. I don't think I've been in a meeting, somebody hasn't asked why we're not putting stormwater upstream. That one is one that people go past, and I think we get a definite no, they're not gonna let you do it.
But I think the conversation from like the novice is build Cannonsburg Dam.
Yeah.
Upstream, and then what was described tonight is not Cannonsburg Dam.
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
another de facto McLaughlin on ball field.
It's just bigger.
It's just bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cannonsburg Dam is what you need to solve the problem if you want to do a pond. If you don't do it by detention upstream.
Yeah.
There's nowhere upstream for Cannonsburg Dam. Unless you want to take half of it from Sinclair or half of that bowl.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure. By all means. You got the gavel?
We've been at this for 2 hours. Would it be of any disadvantage to think about what we've learned tonight and not do a motion to council? Or would there be more of a benefit to make to move it on to council?
I think, my humble opinion, I think we move phase 1 forward, because we know that it's the cornerstone, it's the linchpin, if you will, for everything else that could potentially happen afterwards. And so why, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Was at least get the process started. We may not get funding grants for 15 years.
And we've always seen this, so it's not like, this isn't the first time we've seen it.
Yeah.
All right,
The planning commission discussion is really involved.
Yeah.
right.
It's really what we need to sleep on.
Yeah, that's
Right.
that's what we got. Yeah, that's a conversation we have with council, with where they're head at, that's a conversation you have with people in Walton Street. Too.
Yeah.
The people that actually live there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's fair for us to sit here and go, hey, we're gonna do this with Walton Street and
Right.
not go down and find out what their thoughts are, And I talk about people's houses and lives.
All right.
I mean, the phase 1 doesn't impact, lots of houses and that.
Right,
You know, 2018 was when we had the last big one, and this was kind of a reminder that, stuff needs to happen, so. I'll make a motion and you guys can either say yay or I make a motion that we forward on recommendation to at least initiate phase 1, option 1 through 3, or,
Phase one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
and I think as far as, phase 2 and phase 3,
Right,
those are the
yes.
things.
It takes some time to digest, yes. Okay. All right, let's go on to the last subject here, which is the active transportation plan. On July 12th, 2021, Bridgeville Council approved the traffic plan and design to complete the active transportation contract. Right now, we're in the process of creating the steering committee. And do you want to talk about who's on the steering committee so far?
Yes, I think our goal is, like you said, we were just under contract.
Right.
Council awarded that 2 weeks ago. We want to get the project moving within a month. Our goal is to have a steering committee that's well represented move this forward. Right now, we have the working group, which is the members from the council that are on there, plus the planning commission folks. We have the PennDOT safety manager, he already volunteered to be on it. 2 from county planning, one's their mobility manager, but that's the representative. The police chief, so we have law enforcement fines, so that what we're talking about actually gets enforced, and myself. So that brings up to 12. Talking to the consultant, he said you have 12, no more than 15 people. Steering committee would meet, I think it's like 3-4 times. We would meet back to all of council and have a planning commission month. So what I'm hoping to do is I'll shoot an email out to the working group, the group that interviewed, and basically we've been pushing this to say, hey, we want to wrap up appointments to the steering committee by a date, and then that we can get our first meeting on board with the consultant sometime in the office. So check your email, maybe think of someone. I know Justine's been thinking outside the box for some people who
Dr.
are lost.
Strain from the Vision Source up there on Main Street, part of the steering committee. She's agreed. She was very active in Brookline.
Okay.
With her community, so.
And I would push her beyond.
Oh, okay.
Parking before she does the time.
Parking might be a good part for her.
That's, she doesn't time to be on that, but something like this, which is.
It's only a couple of times.
Correct,
And then
right.
just because there's PennDOT County planning folks and the police chief, our goal is to do these meetings during the day. We'll do them like quasi Zoom in person so that it's flexible for it. And it's not much of a commitment because the project is only gonna last at most 7 months. So this isn't like a 5-year or a 20 target before.
All right. Comprehensive plan for the 6 companies that have responded to the RFP for the comprehensive plan have been selected for in-person interviews by the code committee. The 4 companies to be interviewed are on August 5th, Mackin and HRG, and August 19th, we're going to interview Claiborne and Evolve.
The second day.
August 19th. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns that we need to address? Anybody else in the public want to say anything? No?
Thanks for having on that.
I think there was one item that Tim was mentioning, trying to piggyback some of the traffic study stuff on the active transportation.
Right.
The only thing that you said that I was a little bit, just like this flood plan is very broad and comprehensive with multiple phases. I would hope that you would ask for that, the traffic consultants to provide another proposal separate and distinct from the active transportation. You have to ask them to provide a separate one that is larger and overlaid, so that you can start to digest that.
All right. All right. That's about it. I need a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Meeting is ended. Thank you.
I'm gonna pull it up. You,